Hello and welcome to the DigiHype Media Presents Get Noticed Online podcast series brought to you by DigiHype Media. DigiHype Media, digital marketing made easy. Today our guest is Charlene Hofbauer. Charlene is the Executive Director for the Workforce Planning Board of Waterloo, Wellington, and Dufferin. Charlene, thank you for being here.
Thanks for inviting me, Clint.
Yeah, no, you're very welcome. This is exciting. Charlene, maybe we could start off a little bit by telling us, our guests and stuff, all about the Workforce Planning Board and what it's all about, its function and so on.
Yeah, the Workforce Planning Board is one of 26 planning boards, actually it's 25, planning boards across Ontario. Okay. We're funded by the Ministry of Labour, Immigration, Training and Skills Development. And our goal and our mission is to share local labor market information around the workforce and industry to each of our geographical areas. Okay. So mine is Waterloo, Wellington, Dufferin. Right. And I provide data analysis, trends, to lots of stakeholders in the community, such as education and business and economic development, and the organizations that help job seekers. So I'm providing that data to them. We're doing interesting things on the ground to kind of get ideas started, start pilots, and to connect people who aren't, maybe they're going down the same path, thinking about the same issue, but they haven't connected with each other. And we're hearing that they're both going on this same path together. So we introduce them to each other to use our resources better, both staff and financial, to work on a lot of these solutions because they're pretty big ones right now.
Well, that's fantastic. Now, you're a branch that works under both the federal and provincial government?
We work under the provincial government, provincial, but we do have right now a project that is federally funded. So we take our funding from wherever those opportunities exist to explore those solutions.
Well, that's fantastic. Okay, great. Now, the planning board does ongoing research, including an annual deliverable that you do, and it's called the Employer One Survey.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Our Employer One Survey, we've actually moved it to every 2 years. Okay. But it is a survey that we do of all employers, as many employers as we can get, around what are the recruitment challenges? What are the retention issues? You know, do you have a succession plan in place? So we can kind of get an idea of how business in Waterloo, Wellington, Dufferin is getting ready for those talent crunches that are coming up. And we just started in 2022 talking a lot about what's the makeup of your organization? How is your organization connecting to youth, to women, to immigrants, to persons with disabilities? So we're really starting to explore like what is happening on that business front. So that's what we do every other year. And in the off year, we try and look at what the results were and get them out so that people can use that data to create new programs, or they can like inform some of their strategies and things like that.
That's I had a chance to look at some of the data results. It's amazing the amount of information that you have available to businesses, employers out there, right?
Yeah, and we've actually talked to some employers and they actually use that data to benchmark. So they're looking at, okay, so how much turnover did I have compared to everybody else? Right? Because we do break some of that data out by industry. So I can kind of look and see, okay, there's this many manufacturers. It seems they went through 20 people a year. I'm doing 15. Maybe I'm doing something right here and give myself a little pat on the back, right? And talk to my staff about that, about how we do keep each other and we seem to be a better team maybe. So we have heard that opportunity exists of employers can use that data to kind of benchmark themselves against their industry.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, how do you determine who you partner with? How does that process work?
So we're looking for anybody who is connected into business. So last year, we connected with our economic development. So they have a number of businesses they connect with. We're connected to the Grand Valley Construction Association. We're connected into our chambers around that business front. And we're connected into any other industry associations that are local or that serve local employers. And if we get something that's out of our region, we ship it off to our partner board and say, hey, this could be part of your Employer One survey. We got this response for you.
That's awesome.
So,
so you share information.
We do share information. We're very connected as a group around what's happening in Southern Ontario. We have a group that meets every couple months, and the executive directors get together and they talk about, what are those bigger trends? What's happening? Is there a way we could do research together to create something bigger?
Right.
So,
excellent.
Yeah.
So are you able to track changes? I mean, you must be able to track changes every other year over a period of time. The changes that your data has assisted with making,
yes,
with employment and stuff like that.
Yeah, we can do some of that. So 2022 versus 2024, we've seen employers, they're still struggling to find people, but
Right.
not as much as they were in 2022, because if you go back to 2022, everyone was reopening and
Right.
re-upscaling, and now we're kind of like, okay, we're feeling a little better about it all. We don't need quite as many people, but we do see trends that emerge in the data. We also see consistencies. So for all our efforts of trying to change things, it's not quite moving needles.
Right.
So we know that some of our solutions they're at least keeping us status quo and not making it worse, but there's still some opportunities to move things forward.
Excellent. And your partners that join you to assist with this data collection, they obviously can give you feedback beyond the numbers and say, listen, based on our results,
Yes.
or what we've done, this is how we feel it's helped us.
Yeah, they do. Some take the data and use it in their own pieces. We know that the region of Waterloo has used it. The Economic Development Department has used it in some of their strategy thought process and some of their consultations. And we also can kind of see where we're still not engaging some sectors. We'd really like to engage more tourism.
Okay.
And we'd also like to engage a little more of that retail, because we also run a website called findyourjob.ca.
Okay.
And through the past 4 years that site's been active, retail salespeople's never left the top 5. So
Wow,
to have that feedback from that sector would be amazing to know how much of that's turnover, how much of that is growth, how much of that is a population that's transient, like our students, right?
Right,
They come
right.
and they go.
For sure. Yeah.
So those sorts of pieces would be great to grasp a little
Yeah,
more.
absolutely. I'm sure a lot of people would be interested, right? What's the percentage breakdown for retail? It's quite high, isn't it, in small business?
Yeah, there's a lot of small retailers that are, under that 10.
Yeah.
So you have them, and then you have like Lowe's,
Right.
like in Home Depot.
That's right, yeah.
So that's kind of the
jumps to a box
situation.
store.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So tell me, just kind of flipping for a bit here, tell me about some of the student initiatives you do. I mean, I was reading about the Manufacturing Day. That's kind of one of the initiatives, of course. But tell me a little bit about what you're doing on that side of things.
So we work very closely with our school boards and the college around some initiatives for students. Manufacturing Day is one we have done. Actually, before I was executive director of I was project coordinator here. Right. So I actually brought that into the region, Manufacturing Day. It was largely in the U.S. There was only a couple of Canadian sites. So we were one of the early Canadian sites. We used to take students into manufacturers and show them around. Like, what does it look like? What does it feel like? Having them meet with other young people who are employed in manufacturing.
Right.
One of the challenges right now is the lack of bus drivers and the lack of supply teachers. Okay. So we're having a little bit of a challenge of what that day is going to look like. So we're kind of putting it on hold this year.
Right.
So kind of like reformat, how do we do this? For the past few years, we've done videos, which have worked well.
Right.
And has put that information still in those careers classes, those specialist high skills majors classes, like they're still there. And then recently we've just started working with Waterloo Catholic to give their guidance counselors some training on some really great tools to help their students. So we're always thinking about, what does that future look like for those students and young people across Waterloo region. Excellent.
And I mean, I happen to see one of your videos regarding the working day for the students to go in and sort of visit and stuff like that, and the response looked great. I mean, some of the kids their eyes just opened to what the opportunities are for them outside of maybe what traditional sort of values are, what they should be doing type thing, as opposed to what's available for you.
Exactly.
You can make a career out of it, right? So yeah, great. Now for the Workforce Planning Board, the local labor update, I guess it's 2024, the recent one, right, that was published. There's a part a part of it that was titled Mini Market Big Impact, right? And your keynote message as the executive director, and of course I'm going to paraphrase, but you spoke to the fact that, first of all, persons are having challenges to find work that align with their training. And we just kind of touched on that a second ago about the video, with their skills and personal needs and stuff like that. And the second piece of that is employers can't find properly trained people for their specific tasks that they may have for work that's available. Can you maybe expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, that was a concept that was originally put forward by Dr. Rick Miner back in 2012. Okay. And he always said this was coming down the line. And it's finally here. Right. I think it's where we're finally at. We kind of saw it in small pieces, but now we're really starting to see it. In things like our desperate need for skilled trades, our desperate need for nurses and teachers and early childhood educators, and you pick the occupation that you'd like. Those are very highly trained skill sets.
Right.
And there aren't enough people going into them. And so now we're finally at that point where we see a lot of business students who don't have as much opportunity because they just don't in this current market.
Right.
But there's other jobs out there that would, if they had maybe better direction, or had kept their minds open, or things were better promoted, that some of those things could have happened. So we're actually seeing that there are tremendous skill sets that don't have jobs right now, and then there's jobs that are just going with no one in them, and so that's the struggle. Like people always ask me, what should I be? And I'm like, have you ever considered being an auto service tech? Because the offered hourly wage in a year went up $10 an hour.
Wow.
That tells me employers are desperate for that auto service truck and coach technician, and signing up for an apprenticeship might be the way to go.
Right.
Versus no offense, but a lot of students go to marketing, and we look at a lot of those jobs and we're like, for how many students there aren't quite the number of opportunities.
Yeah, and it's such a broad spectrum too, right? I mean, what is really marketing? I mean, it's kind of a little bit of everything, right?
It is.
Unless you really narrow it down and sort of pick a niche and train there, it's difficult to find employment, I'm sure, right? So
exactly.
I tend to agree.
That's kind of what that conversation is where people will say, there's 23,000 people unemployed. How do they not have jobs? Because here's this number of jobs, and it's like, because the skill sets aren't matching. Right. We're not graduating the right types of students for the market, and maybe we're not attracting the right people into Waterloo region.
Do you find over a period of time with the data and the results and the sharing of all this information that this trend starts to close and it starts to narrow?
Well, it's recently it's been widening. It was always kind of there, and I think it always will be there to some degree. But it's just seemed in the last year it's widened a bit. Now, it's hard to say how it will go moving forward, because a lot of it is dependent upon, at least from the social services side, a lot is going to depend on how much funding there is for healthcare, for education, for some of those things. But we need those things to grow the rest of the economy, right?
Gotcha.
So it's one of those challenges. Our work is to try and figure out and work with partners to reclose that gap. And have people understand what's really in demand. Right. I always say the best approach to your career search is your passion plus the data, right?
Gotcha.
And so
making an educated decision,
making
right?
a good educated decision. Yep. That's evidence-based.
Right. No, that's 100% true. I agree. Tell me about, because this sort of a lot of this currently has sort of wrapped itself because of COVID, is sort of all part of it. How has that affected both sides of the fence as far as people looking for jobs and people, offering jobs? How has COVID affected the whole thing? I mean, we talked a bit about it, but I'm sure there's more information there. So
COVID's really affected the whole piece. We've been looking at some of the side effects of COVID. So a lot of people don't know the first COVID babies are going to school this September.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. So if you had a baby in 2024, they're heading to school this September. They're some of them weren't socialized for 2 years because of their parents being scared to put them into daycare, things like that. Right. So true. So they're going to be a little bit different, which will create challenges in in jobs like ECEs and teachers because they may be facing a different type of
Right.
student, right? A student who's been through a little bit. I think all of our students have been through a little bit. So COVID is kind of affecting, from that perspective, who's in the education system. I think also COVID has, I think this is not my thought process. Someone I was talking to said,
Right.
it seems people are meaner.
Okay.
Or like just want things a certain way.
Right.
And so that's been a bit of a struggle for our service industries, right? Because people show up and they want a certain level of care.
Right.
And maybe they're not thinking as much about other people. And so that's challenging.
Becomes a bit of a one-sided.
It does. It becomes hard to get up and want to go to work in the morning sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing COVID's done is really made us more aware of mental health.
Right.
I think that is being a big shift in our workforce. And I think also with our employers. I've had more employers reach out to me and say, hey, I really just want to support my staff the best way I possibly can mentally and keep them mentally healthy. Like, where do I start?
Right.
So some of those pieces are really important.
That's interesting. This is kind of a great segue when we talk about the changes and the changes in employees, how they feel about, when they come into a new job or a new role or whatever. But virtual employment versus on the job, bricks and mortar, how has that changed?
I
know that's a biggie.
That is a biggie. My colleague up in Fort County, which is Bruce Gray, Perth and Huron, did some research on this during,
Right.
and they're close enough to us and they border us. So I think some of her findings fit here. Most jobs, you have to go to work. You've got at least part of it, right?
Right.
A nurse can't work from home right now. We haven't invented that technology yet.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Our retail sector, there's a lot of us who have to go to work. And so the work from home remote concept is there for some of us who have that luxury. I'm going to say we're privileged to, my staff work from home on Fridays.
Right.
Right. And we're a very privileged group to do that, but we're research project based. So we have that privilege and that opportunity.
Right.
And I think in some of those professional occupations, that is becoming a reality, at least part of the week.
Yes.
I think all of us kind of do still want some sort of socialization over the course of the week outside of our home. And it's been really interesting because we've really been watching the trends with the younger workers. So they're traditionally called Gen Z. They're about 11 years old,
Right.
on through to like just over
Right.
25. So they're not all in the workforce yet. I'll say that first. We're
Right.
just getting the early adopters. Originally it was they're going to all want remote. And as the data has come out, a lot of professional Gen Zers want a hybrid option where you can come in, you can see your boss, you can have that face-to-face conversation. But if I'm having a day where there's appointments, I've got that flexibility built in, right?
Right.
I would say right now, flexibility is more important than necessarily working from home. Like, can you be flexible with me somehow that if something comes up, we can talk it out?
Right.
Which is great for those who are small or project-based,
Yeah.
or which is a struggle if you're unionized.
That's right.
Right?
Absolutely.
So,
yeah, it's a whole different game.
Yeah, so there are going to be some industries that are going to have that advantage in that workforce, and there are going to be some aspects of the workforce.
Manufacturing. Or
Yeah,
whatever it
that's
might
going to be
that
hard to
you
do.
kinda need to
Flex.
be there, right? So
Yeah, unless you have something built in.
Yeah.
And it was actually when they did it, it was older millennials and Gen X who wanted more home time. Why? Because they have the kids and the parents,
Right,
and
right.
There's just more things. So those are those sorts of pieces
Interesting.
that as we keep going, we're finding what we thought would happen isn't necessarily going to.
Is there a percentage off the top of your head you can think of that? You're a data person, so
That report, I think I read that report 3 months ago, so I'm
Oh,
not
okay.
sure what it was, but I knew that, I do remember that kind of older millennial who's about early 40s,
right.
right? Some of them have just stopped doing childcare.
Oh, okay.
Like when you think about it, if they had their kids at 30, the
Yeah,
kids are
yeah.
finally 10, they don't have to do before and after care anymore.
Right.
So some of those situations, yeah,
Okay.
not off the top of my head, but I know it
Interesting.
was a little more weighted there.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting because you would almost think it would be the opposite. The younger ones that are going to have these challenges, right? That are sort of coming through the workforce and entering into it, I guess. here's an interesting thing, and sort of reading through your data and so on. One of the things that strikes me as being in, the digital marketing side of things and advertising, AI is a big deal now,
Yes.
right? And as an advertising company, we always kind of, we use some of it, but very, very little, simply because there's a human aspect that AI just is not anywhere near.
Not
currently.
yet.
Not yet. Tell us about AI and the effects that you guys have found that, maybe affecting businesses.
I think the interesting part, and this is I'm going to take this one from an employer myself,
Okay.
that we've noticed. We put out some calls for some applications, and my staff, I have a group, I have a initiative called the Workplace and Immigrant Network that works with professional immigrants to get them back into their lines of work. And I remember looking at a resume, and the resume and the cover letter were inconsistent with the email.
Okay.
The language had changed.
Right.
There was some struggle in the email with the English language versus the cover letter, which was so, like, I could have written that. It was beautiful. It was obvious, and that was my flag. It's like, hey, staff, come here. What do you think? Is this AI generated?
Right.
Then I had another one that was very obviously AI generated.
Right.
So as employers, we're now facing that as we're creating job postings, maybe that we run through AI for an edit.
Right.
Our job seekers are doing the same.
Absolutely.
And so that is one challenge that employers will face, is the package you got from a candidate might not be reflective of the candidate's skill levels, especially if you're in communications, right? Or you need some writing done.
Absolutely.
So AI will be interesting, and it'll be interesting to see how interviews will have to change to accommodate that AI aspect in recruitment.
Right.
So that is one area.
Right.
Where I see AI being interesting. I got a really great opportunity in February to meet with somebody who was really focusing on the AI space, and I got to talk to him afterwards, and I said, so what you're telling me is that critical thinking skills are going to become really, really important, and they are.
Right.
Like looking at something and critically thinking through it. We always hear about that was AI generated, and you say to someone, how do you know? Like they have 7 fingers on one hand, right?
Right.
So I just look at it really quickly. I don't see 7 fingers until I dive into it. Or like I said, being able to have AI create something for you, but then going back and, like you said, humanizing it, making it relevant, and having AI, like Google's AI, which looks at the internet. There's a lot of wrong stuff on the internet. So the question becomes like open AI versus a closed company AI, where you're just looking at the documents you already have. Those are going to be some very big conversations we're going to be having.
Absolutely.
And making sure that what we're seeing is what we're getting.
Yeah,
100%.
absolutely. We've even seen it internally using certain platforms for jobs, for getting new employees. Mm-hmm. And the big challenge is, for me, I can write an AI intro letter or a letter to have somebody come in for an interview. But when you write your own and then you look at what AI writes, you look at it and you go, yeah, I would never say that.
Yeah, exactly.
That's definitely not me. But, it's some people use it, right? But you do catch it. You can catch it.
Yeah, and so the question will become, like, those who can communicate effectively and with a human touch, well, that communication becomes so much more important in that recruitment process, in that conversation process, because I think our employers are going to have to look at the written stuff they get with a little bit more critical eye until they get that person to the interview. So we might start to see that disconnect between what we got on paper and what's in front of us.
Right, and I think that's a great piece to ensure employers are aware of, right? That they need to not only meet on possibly Zoom, but they need to meet face to face. At the end of the day, it's where the rubber hits the road. You're going to know pretty fast whether or not that's the individual on paper, right?
Exactly, very much so.
Yeah, we tend to go through that. We tend to go through that process here, where we'll do a Zoom interview, a phone call, and then we'll meet face to face. So maybe, Charlene, before we close off, maybe tell what are some of the benefits that clearly there's many benefits you bring to the table, and that the Workforce Planning Board brings to the table. Tell me some of the ones that are in particular your favorites that maybe employers sort of gravitate towards.
Yeah. If I were an employer right now, I would be looking at findyourjob.ca. You can actually sign up for an employer account, and then you can get real life, in-time labor market information. So I can follow my competitors. I can follow my industry. Maybe there's another industry that takes a lot of the people I take, so I can follow them. I can follow jobs, and it'll give me like who's doing what and what are they paying according to the job postings. Because that's the number one question I get from employers. Am I competitive? And that's a really quick way to figure out if the offerings out there are competitive, because if you're seeing maybe your employers or your competition is putting in their postings below what you're offering, then maybe that's what you need to start putting in your postings. You put, I pay higher than what's being advertised, right?
Right, and you have that edge, right?
That is one of my favorite. And if you are an employer, there's also an employer resource corner. So if you need help with accessing grants or things like that, it's all there in one stop. So that's findyourjob.ca.
Findyourjob.ca, okay.
Yeah.
And what about your main site where we can can see the collected data?
I would check out Employer One.
Okay.
Having heard a couple of employers talk about how they use it as benchmarking, I think that's a really great way to approach the data.
Right.
And to know, one of the questions we do ask is like, what are your hard to fill positions? And if you've got one of those hard to fill positions, then it's time to start thinking about what you're offering, right? But it just verifies that someone else is in the same boat as you, right?
Right, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So that helps tremendously.
We can share in the pain.
Exactly.
That's awesome. So I guess one more thing in closing I'm going to ask you about. We talked about partnering. Of course, you're always looking for partners.
Yes.
Where does a business look to connect with you?
Yeah,
for partner?
You can connect right straight to us. You can go at info@workforceplanningboard.com,
okay.
And my staff person will direct you to the right person. We might have something going on right now that you'd be a great fit for. Or they'll send you up to me and we'll have a great conversation of what are you looking for, what's going on, and we can tell you about opportunities to get involved.
Excellent. Well, Charlene, thank you so much. You're so easy to talk to.
Thank you.
It's great information, and I'm going to remember that website you told us about where we can go in there and get information on our competitors and what
you want to do that.
I saw our podcast manager. They're just writing it down, so that's excellent. Charlene Hofbauer, folks, Executive Director for the Workforce Planning Board. Charlene, again, thank you for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you.